He said, I was put in a very unusual circumstance where the country was scared. They really wanted someone who was steady and honest and showed integrity and stuck with the facts, and I became the symbol of that. There's that trademark Anthony Fauci humility. And when you become a symbol for a certain segment of people, the people against that, you become a villain to them. See, he was a symbol of steadiness, honesty, integrity, sticking with the facts, according to Dr. Fauci. And that was what he was a symbol of. In fact, according to Dr. Fauci, there's been an actual Fauci effect wherein people have gone into the medical field just because he's so good at this. People watched him on TV and they said, this person who was wrong about pretty much every area of COVID, this guy, that's why I'm going into the industry. Here's Dr. Fauci bragging about Dr. Fauci, because if there's one person who loves Dr. Fauci, it is Dr. Fauci.
It's called the Fauci effect, which is sort of like, trust me, I don't get excited about that. I mean, it's nice, but I mean, people go to medical school now, people are interested in science, not because of me, because most people don't know me, who I am. My friends know me, my wife knows me, but people don't know me. It's what I symbolize. And what I symbolize in an era of the normalization of untruths and lies and all the things you're seeing going on in society from January 6th to everything else that goes on, people are craving for consistency, for integrity, for truth, and for people caring about people.
Man, does Anthony Fauci love Anthony Fauci. That dude just loves that guy. You can tell that. You can see in his documentaries. Hulu did a documentary on him at one point, and there was a picture of Anthony Fauci on the office wall of Anthony Fauci. Now, as a person who is relatively well-known, I can assure you this. My office does not include a giant portrait of me because this is the mark of a true douchebag. I mean, just to put it absolutely bluntly, if you have a giant portrait of you sitting behind you, there are only two reasons for that. One, you're the dictator of a small communist country, or two, you're a douchebag. Those are the only two possible reasons for that to be the case. It also happens to be the case that Dr. Fauci was wrong on like everything along the way here. And so very early on, he was really suggesting shutting the country down. And then later he denied it. But unfortunately, all this stuff lives on video for Dr. Fauci. He admitted just a few months back that, yeah, he did recommend shutting the country down.
What was the most crucial decision you had to make during the pandemic? And what was the critical thought process that took you through it?
Yeah, the most crucial, it was a decision to make a recommendation to the president. It wasn't my decision that I could implement. And when it became clear that when we had community spread in the country with a few cases of community spread, this was way before there was a major explosion like we saw in the Northeastern corridor driven by New York City metropolitan area. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And that was a very difficult decision because I knew it would have serious economic consequences, which it did. But there was no way to stop the explosive spread that we knew would occur if we didn't do that.
By the way, you didn't stop the explosive spread, as it turns out. The spread was never stopped, actually. Here's the thing. You probably shouldn't want anyone telling you what you ought to think. And big tech, big government, they have an interest in doing this. One of the ways they do this, they keep a log of every single thing you do online. It's pretty creepy. It's pretty wild. But your internet provider like AT&T or Comcast is allowed to store logs of every website you've ever visited. They can legally sell that data to anyone, which is why I use ExpressVPN, because my data is my business. ExpressVPN reroutes your internet connection through their secure servers, so your internet provider can't see or log what you do online. Now, some of you might be wondering, hold up. If I'm routing all my data through a VPN, doesn't the VPN actually monitor what I'm doing? Well, you're right to wonder about that because a lot of VPNs claim to have a no logs policy, but then they actually log customer activity. But ExpressVPN does not do that. They use trusted server technology. They were the first major VPN provider to engineer all of their VPN servers to run in RAM, which makes it impossible for their VPN servers to store any data, including logs of any ExpressVPN customer. ExpressVPN is super easy to use. Like, check this out. So I open up my phone, I open up my ExpressVPN app, and behold, here it is. But right now it says I'm not connected. Sad face. So I hit the button, boom, connected, protected. It's that simple. You don't have to take my or ExpressVPN's word for it. ExpressVPN is so confident in their no logs claim, they've even had one of the biggest assurance firms, PwC, audit their technology. So stop letting people keep logs of what you do online. Visit expressvpn.com/Ben Shapiro show right now. Find out how you can get 3 months for free. The only thing that actually broke the vectors of the virus was the vaccine. in terms of bringing down the deadliness of the disease, particularly among those who are highly, highly vulnerable. What should have been done from the very outset, and it was very clear that this was the case by June, certainly May, June of 2020, is that people who are the most healthy, the youngest cohort, should have gone back to work. People who are really vulnerable should have stayed at home. Kids should have gone back to school. That was very obvious even by summer of 2020. But at that time, it was Anthony Fauci who was recommending that states remain closed. Here he was in July 2020 ripping on states that were quote unquote reopening.
There are some governors and mayors that did it perfectly correctly. They stayed exactly. They wanted to open up, so they went through the guidelines of opening up their state. But what happened is that many of the citizenry said, well, I'm either going to be locked down or I'm going to let it all rip. And you could see from just looking documented on TV and in the papers of still photos of people at bars and at congregations, which are a perfect setup, particularly if you don't have a mask. Then there are some times when, despite the guidelines and the recommendations to open up carefully and prudently, some states skipped over those and just opened up too quickly.
Okay, and then it's worthwhile noting here that Anthony Fauci flip-flopped on masks about 27 different times here. He started off at the very beginning of the pandemic, suggesting via email that masks were actually wildly ineffective. He actually was caught on email saying this when all of his emails were released, saying that masks would not stop the spread. Quote, masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring infection. The typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus, which is small enough to pass through the material. It might, however, provide some slight benefit in keeping out gross droplets if someone coughs or sneezes on you. This is Sylvia Burwell, is working for the Trump administration at the time. I do not recommend that you wear a mask, particularly since you are going to a very low-risk location. Your instincts are correct. Money is best spent on medical countermeasures such as diagnostics and vaccines. This is in February of 2020. Masks aren't really effective. Okay, then, of course, he flipped and masks were the most effective. So, as of today, like last week, he's still telling you to wear masks despite the fact that there is zero data. There are literally zero studies. They do not exist showing that masks are effective in stopping the spread of Omicron, unless you are talking about like N95s that are strapped to your face as though you are in some sort of medical unit, okay, which no one is wearing a mask like that. But here's Anthony Fauci still promoting this stuff.
You are in a zone or a county, a state, or a city that has a very high level of dynamic of viral circulation. The CDC would recommend strongly that you wear a mask in a congregate indoor setting. And that would include schools, places of work, anything that brings people together in a closed environment. That is good public health practice.
So he's still doing this. Now, he's been allowed to get away with this because the media have been incredibly warmed for Dr. Fauci since the beginning. They posited him as sort of rival to President Trump. And let's be fair about this. President Trump is to blame for appointing Dr. Fauci to this position. The simple fact of the matter is that he made Dr. Fauci significantly more famous because he put him out front. And then he started arguing with the guy he had put out front. Yeah, well, what he should have done is taken control of the situation, President Trump. And he should have said, listen, here's the way I want to do this. Because in the end, when you shut down the economy, when you tell businesses to shut down, when you tell everybody to follow Dr. Fauci, that's a political decision. That is not just a medical decision. The question as to whether there's a medical basis for what you are doing and that it's balanced properly with economic considerations, that is politics. And so it was a mistake by Trump to put Fauci out front. That said, Fauci then proceeded to do a terrible job. And again, this repeated itself over and over and over again. He's not been honest, for example, about the fact that he supported gain-of-function research. Like throughout his entire career, gain-of-function research is where you actually increase the functionality of a virus in order to see if you can counter the virus. And he has backed this for a very long time. Then he tried to obscure the fact that he had backed gain-of-function research by saying that when you are creating a virus in a lab that only applies to animals and then it transmits to humans, that's not technically gain-of-function research. Gain-of-function research is within a species. It's not cross-species. Okay, well, that is obfuscating without really clarifying. Here is Dr. Fauci avoiding answers about funding gain-of-function research.
How do you know they didn't lie to you?
Excuse me, sir?
How do you know they didn't lie to you and use the money for gain-of-function research anyway?
Well, we've seen the results of the experiments that were done and that were published, and that the viruses that they studied are on public databases now. So none of that was gain of function. So
How do you know they didn't do the research and not put it on their website?
there's no way of guaranteeing that.
There's no way of guaranteeing that. And of course, in his arguments with Rand Paul was saying, why do you back gain of function research? And Fauci was saying, well, gain of function research isn't the sort of stuff that created COVID-19 if it was indeed created in a lab. But it really, on a generic level, it really, really did. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date with all our future content.